The lecture hall buzzed with the soft chittering and clicks of 23 cadets from 12 different species as they settled into their seats for Xenocombat Theory class at the Galactic Military Academy. Professor Velthor stood at the front of the room, his forearms folded across his chitinous chest as he waited for silence to fall across the tiered seating him. The varied collection of aliens sat, Sergeant Maya Chen, the only human in a class dominated by species that towered over her or possessed natural armor that made them look like walking tankshi, sat in the third row, her notebook open and her posture relaxed but attentive. Today we examine primitive combat doctrines, Professor Velthor announced, his mandibles clicking as he spoke in perfectly accented Galactic common. Before technology gave us plasma rifles and energy shields, species relied on natural advantages: claws, fangs, venom, armor. The holographic display behind him flickered to life, showing various species in their pre-space flight eras engaged in combate. Kryn warrior with 4-bladed arms swept through enemies with devastating efficiency. A Velcheron used telepathic confusion to disorient opponents before striking with poison tail barbs. A massive Thoraxian simply charged through obstacles, its natural exoskeleton deflecting primitive weapons. Each species developed fighting styles that maximize their biological advantages. The professor continued. The Kryn developed the four-wind blade dance to utilize all 4 arms simultaneously. The Velcherons created the mind strike discipline, combining telepathy with physical combat. The Thoraxians perfected the avalanche charge using their mass and armor. Maya took notes quietly, her pen moving across the page in smooth strokes. She had learned early in her academy career that staying quiet and observing was often the best strategy when surrounded by species who had never encountered humans before. What about species without natural weapons? Asked a small Pixith cadet, whose people possessed incredible speed, but little else in terms of combat advantages. Excellent question. Professor Velthor replied. Tool use becomes essential for such species. The Pixith developed hit-and-run tactics with thrown weapons the Grenfolk created. Elaborate trap systems. Evolution does not grant every species the same gifts that was when Zaxol spoke up from the back row. The Thoraxian cadet was massive even by his species standards, his exoskeleton a deep purple-black that spoke of a warrior lineage. His voice rumbled like grinding stones when he talked. So species without natural weapons are essentially helpless in hand-to-hand combat, he said, with the casual confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. They must rely entirely on tools and technology. Professor Veltharis' antenna twitched. A sign Maya had learned meant the professor was choosing his words carefully. That would be an oversimplification. Humans, especially Zaxel, continued. Clearly warming to his topic, he gestured toward Maya without looking directly at her. No claws, no fangs worth mentioning, no armor, no venom, no natural weapons at all. Their skin tears easily, their bones break under pressure. Their bite force is pathetic compared to actual predators without their weapons and technology. They are helpless. Humans don't fight barehanded because they can't. Several students turned to look at Maya. Some seemed curious about how she would react, while others nodded in agreement with Zaxel's assessment. Maya sat very still for a moment, her pen hovering above her notebook. Then, slowly and deliberately, she raised her hand. The gesture was so quiet and controlled that it seemed almost out of place given the weight of what had just been said. The room fell. Silent. Professor Velthor's 4 eyes all focused on the human cadet. Yes, Sergeant Chen, he asked. Maya stood, her movements economical and precise. She was small compared to most species in the room, barely 5.5 feet tall. Slim build. No visible natural weapons or armor. Permission to provide a practical demonstration. Professor, she said, her voice was calm, almost pleasant. During the next combat exercise period, the silence in the room became absolute. Even the usual background noises of breathing and minor movements seemed to stop as everyone processed what the human had just suggested. Zaxel turned to look at her directly for the first time. His compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. You wish to fight me? He asked to prove that humans can fight without weapons. I'm offering to demonstrate human hand-to-hand combat capability. Maya replied. Her tone remained even and professional. If you're willing to participate in the demonstration, the Thoraxian's mandibles spread in what his species used as a smile. I accept, Professor. Velthore's antennae were now moving in complex patterns that Maya had learned to indicate a deep thought mixed with concern. This is highly irregular, the professor said. Combat exercises are carefully controlled and with full monitoring and safety protocols. Maya added quickly. Medical staff on standby, standard academy training conditions. The professor looked between his human student and the massive Thoraxian cadet. His decades of military experience told him this was going to happen whether he approved it in an official capacity or not. Better to have it properly supervised than risk an unsanctioned fight breaking out later. Very well, he said. Finally, 3 days from now, during the scheduled combat exercise period, full monitoring, medical staff present, and the fight continues until surrender or incapacitation. Both parties must acknowledge these terms. Acknowledged. Maya said. Acknowledged. Zaxel rumbled. The professor dismissed the class early, but no one moved quickly. Students clustered in groups, speaking in hushed tones about what they had just witnessed. Maya gathered her materials calmly, seemingly unbothered by the attention as she walked toward the door. She passed Zaxel in the aisle. He looked down at her from his considerable height. I will try not to hurt you too badly. Human, he said. Wasn't meant cruelly. His tone suggested he genuinely believed he was being kind. Maya looked up at him and smiled. It was a small, controlled expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. I appreciate your concern, she said. Then she left the lecture hall, her footsteps quiet on the polished floor behind her. The room erupted into excited chatter. Word of the upcoming demonstration spread through the Academy's communication networks within the hour. By evening, half the student body knew about the challenge. By the next morning, betting pools had formed among students from various species. The odds heavily favored Zaxel after all. He outweighed the human by more than 60 kilograms, possessed natural armor that could deflect blades, and came from a species renowned across the galaxy for their warrior culture. What chance did a small, soft-skinned human have against that? In her quarters that night, Maya sat cross-legged on her bunk, reviewing anatomical data on Thoraxian physiology. Her roommate, a Velsarin named Kiri, watched with concerned telepathic pulses. Are you certain about this? Kiri asked. He could seriously injure you. Maya didn't look up from her datapad. He could try, she said simply. Her fingers moved across the screen, highlighting joint structures and nerve clusters. Kiri's tail twitched with anxiety. The others don't understand humans yet, she said. They see you as fragile. I know, Maya replied. Now she did look up, and her expression was thoughtful. That's exactly why this demonstration matters. She returned to her study, memorizing pressure points and mechanical weaknesses in Thoraxian anatomy outside her window. The twin moons of the Academy world rose over the training grounds, where in 3 days she would teach her classmates their first real lesson about humanity. The Academy commissary hummed with conversation the morning after the challenge was announced, and Maya found herself the subject of countless stares as she moved through the breakfast line. She selected her meal with the same calm efficiency she applied to everything: protein, complex carbohydrates, hydration, and found a seat near the observation windows. Kiri joined her moments later, her telepathic presence broadcasting concern before she even sat down. The betting pools have you at 22-1 odds against? Kiri said quietly. Some species are wagering you won't last 2 minutes. Maya bit into her toast and chewed thoughtfully before responding. What are you betting? She asked. Her roommate's skin flushed a deeper shade of violet, a sign of emotional distress in Velcharon's eye. Bet everything I have on you. Kiri admitted. My family thinks I'm being irrational. Smart bet, Maya said with a slight smile across the commissary. Zaxel sat with a group of other combat-focused cadets, most of whom were built like biological tanks. They spoke loudly enough that their conversation carried across the room. Thraxian honor demands I give her a chance to surrender before the fight begins. Zoxel was saying it would be shameful to harm someone so clearly outmatched one of his companions. A Kryn with ceremonial combat scars chittered in agreement. Humans are tool users by necessity, the Kryn said. Without their technology, they're just soft mammals. Did you know their bones are internal? Another cadet added, sounding almost scandalized, and they have no redundant organs. One solid strike to the right location could kill them. Maya continued eating. Apparently unbothered by the commentary, Kiri, however, was growing increasingly agitated. Aren't you angry? She asked. They're talking about you like you're some fragile specimen. They don't know any better yet. Maya replied. She finished her breakfast and stood, collecting her tray. They will, though, later that morning. Maya made her way to the Academy's historical archives. The librarian, an ancient Grenfolk whose species were the galaxy's record keepers, looked up with multiple eye stalks as she approached. I need information on human military history, Maya said, specifically hand-to-hand combat systems. The librarian's eye stalks swiveled in a pattern that indicated interest. We have some records from the First Contact War, he said, though most combat footage from that conflict is classified. I need older records. Maya specified pre-space flight era. Earth's historical military documentation. The librarian's eye stalks now showed surprise. That would be extremely extensive. He said your species has documented warfare going back thousands of years. I only need specific sections. Maya said she provided him with a list she had prepared. The librarian returned 20 minutes later with data chips containing what she had requested. Maya thanked him and found a private viewing station. What she pulled up was a curated collection of human martial arts documentation spanning millennia, ancient Greek pancration, where fighters grappled and struck with minimal rules, Roman gladiatorial combat techniques designed for efficiency and lethality, Chinese Kung Fu with its hundreds of distinct styles, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu developed by samurai for armored and unarmored combat, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's ground fighting emphasis, Thai from Thailand with its devastating use of 8 points of contact, Krav Maga from Israel, built for real-world violence, mixed martial arts, the modern synthesis that combined them. She wasn't learning these systems. She had spent years mastering them before ever leaving Earth. What she was doing was reviewing, remembering, and adapting them for an opponent whose anatomy was different from anything these ancient masters had ever imagined. Fighting across the Academy, Zaxiel was training in the main combat gymnasium. His routine was impressive by any standard. He lifted weights that would crush most species, practiced his charging techniques against reinforced barriers, and sparred with other Thraxian cadets. Using their traditional methods, his exoskeleton could withstand significant impacts. His strength allowed him to overpower most opponents through simple physics. His endurance was solid for his species, capable of sustained combat for 15 to 20 minutes before fatigue set in. He had fought and defeated cadets from 8 different species during his time at the Academy. Some of his training partners watched him work and felt confident in his upcoming victory. The human is brave, but foolish. One commented, bravery without capability is just stupidity. What none of them knew was that Professor Velther was watching from the observation deck above. The Kryn instructor had fought beside humans during the First Contact War when Earth and the Galactic Council first encountered each other in a border dispute that turned violent. Remembered the first time he had seen human Marines in close quarters combat. The way they moved seemed almost liquid compared to other species, more rigid fighting styles, the way they adapted mid-combat, switching techniques based on what worked, the way they kept fighting even when injured in ways that would incapacitate other species. Disturbing to their enemies had been the human capacity to not just fight through pain but to use it as fuel of all. Had watched a human soldier with a broken arm disarm and incapacitate 2 enemy combatants using the injured limb as a bludgeon that night. Maya's small study group met in one of the auxiliary training rooms. The group had formed organically over the semester. Cadets who wanted to understand human capabilities rather than dismiss them. There were only 5 members besides Maya, Kiri the Velshran, 2 Pixith scouts named Rill and Ven, a young Grenfolk engineer called Tog, and surprisingly, a Kryn warrior named Shen who had specifically requested to train with the human. Show us again how you do that joint lock, Rill asked the one that works. Regardless of limb configuration, Maya demonstrated slowly. Explaining the principles of leverage and anatomy, every species with articulated joints has mechanical weaknesses. She explained, you identify the hinge, apply pressure perpendicular to its natural range of motion, and the joint fails, it works on two-limbed species. Four-limbed, six-limbed, the principle doesn't change. Shen, a Kryn, worked with her on adapting techniques for his forearms. Your species' martial arts are remarkably sophisticated. He observed, how did humans develop so many different systems? Maya paused, considering her answer, because for most of human history, the most dangerous thing we faced was each other. She said, we didn't have natural weapons, so we made ourselves into weapons. We studied violence like your people study mathematics. We refined it, systematized it, passed it down through generations. The group continued training for another hour. By the end, even the naturally fast Pixith were struggling to keep up with Maya's endurance. How are you not tired? Ven asked, breathing heavily. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. Maya explained, we literally ran prey to death over long distances. Our cardiovascular systems are built for sustained activity. As the group dispersed for the evening, Shen approached Maya privately. The others don't understand what's going to happen in that arena. He said quietly, they think it will be a short demonstration, where Zaxel easily dominates. I know, Maya replied. I fought humans during the contact war. Shen continued, on the wrong side, before I understood what we were really fighting for. Watched a human half your size take down 3 of my armored squad mates in under a minute? What did they do? Maya asked. Shen's mandibles clicked in what might have been remembered fear. They moved like water and struck like lightning. He said they knew exactly where to hit us, despite never having fought Kryn before. They adapted in real time. They didn't stop no matter how much we hurt them. They didn't stop. Maya nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me, she said. Why? Shen asked. To prepare you? To remind yourself? To understand why you're really here? Maya said, you're not here to see if I can beat Zaxel. You're here to see if I can do it without becoming the monster you remember from the war. Shen's antenna dipped in acknowledgement. Can you? He asked. I guess we'll find out, Maya replied. In his quarters that same evening, Zaxel reviewed footage of other species' fighting techniques. Was confident but not arrogant. His warrior culture valued proper preparation. The problem was that there was almost no footage of human hand-to-hand combat available in unclassified databases. What little existed from the contact war was heavily redacted. He found some historical documentation showing ancient human warfare, but it seemed primitive and irrelevant compared to modern combat theory. How could techniques developed thousands of years ago by pre-space flight civilizations possibly threaten someone with his advantages? He shut down his terminal and began his pre-sleep meditation ritual. In 3 days, he would face the human in the arena. He would be respectful and professional. He would give her the chance to surrender with honor, and when she inevitably refused, he would end the fight as quickly and painlessly as possible. It was the merciful thing to do across the campus. Maya finished her evening routine. The combat arena was designed to accommodate students from species of wildly different sizes and environmental needs, which meant it was massive by human standards. Fighting floor itself was a 50-meter circle of impact-absorbent material that could handle everything from a charging Thoraxian to the acid spray of a Meltharian round. This were graduated seating tiers that rose up in concentric rings. And today, every single seat was filled. Maya had never seen the arena this packed. Students from every year and program had found their way here, along with instructors who officially claimed they were observing for educational purposes, but who were really just as curious as everyone else. The noise level was incredible. Dozens of species all talking at once created a sound like being inside a living engine. Maya stood in the preparation room beneath the arena, methodically checking her body. She wore the standard academy combat suit, flexible material that protected against incidental injury but offered no actual armor or advantage. Her hands were wrapped in basic support tape, her hair pulled back tight, her feet bare for better traction. Kiri sat on the bench nearby, her telepathic presence radiating nervous energy. The entire academy is up there. He said, "I've never seen so many species in one place." "Good," Maya replied as she stretched her shoulders more. "Witnesses mean fewer questions later? Are you nervous?" Kiri asked. Maya considered the question. Honestly, no, she said, focused. Yes, aware of what needs to happen, but not nervous. A knock on the door announced Professor Velthor's arrival. The Kryn instructor entered with 2 medical technicians behind him. Their scanners already active and recording baseline biological data. "The rules are simple," Velthor said. His 4 eyes studying Maya carefully. "Fight continues until surrender or incapacitation. Medical override if life signs become critical. No weapons. No equipment beyond standard combat suits. Do you understand?" "Yes, Professor Maya," replied Sergeant Chen, Velthor said, his voice dropping to a quieter register that suggested this was personal rather than professional. "I know what you are capable of. I've seen humans. Fight, be very careful about how much you show them today." Maya met his gaze. "Steadily. I'll show them exactly as much as they need to." "See," she said, "the professor's antennae twitched in what might have been approval or concern then. Let's proceed the walk from preparation." Room 2 arena floor felt simultaneously too long and too short. Maya could hear the crowd noise increasing as she approached. Could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes from dozens of species, all focused on the small human about to fight way outside. Her weight class, the announcer's voice boomed across the arena in galactic. "Common participants are entering the combat floor in the blue corner. Standing 1.7 meters tall and massing 62 kilograms. From Earth, Sergeant Maya Chen." The crowd's reaction was mixed, some cheering, more laughing, a general sense of anticipatory skepticism. Maya walked to her designated corner calmly, her expression neutral. "In the red corner," the announcer continued, "standing 2.3 meters tall and massing 130 kilograms from Thorax Prime. Cadet Zaxel of House Mordith, the Thoraxian, entered to significantly louder applauses. Exoskeleton gleamed under the arena lights. Purple-black, an impressive he moved with the confident, ground-eating stride of someone who had never lost a sanctioned fight. He was, objectively speaking, an intimidating physical presence. The 2 fighters approached the center of the arena, where Professor Velthor waited up close. The size difference was even more dramatic. Chaxel towered over Maya, his armored bulk making her look almost fragile by comparison. "This is a training exercise," Velthor announced loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "Both participants have agreed to these terms. Fight with honor, fight with skill, and remember that your opponent deserves respect." He looked at each fighter in turn. "Any questions?" "No, Professor," they said in unison. "Then take your positions." Maya walked back to her corner, shaking out her arms and rolling her neck. Her heartbeat was steady at 65 beats per minute, well within her normal range. Across the arena, Zaxel performed what looked like a traditional Thoraxian warrior stance sequence. Crowd quieted as Professor Velder raised one arm. "Begin," he said, and brought the arm down. Zaxel moved first, which was what Maya had expected. Thoraxian combat doctrine emphasized the charge, use mass and momentum to overwhelm the opponent. Before they could establish defensive positions, he came at her fast, for someone his size. Exoskeleton-plated feet thundering against the arena floor. Maya didn't retreat. Instead, she angled her body 30 degrees and took 2 quick steps that put her just outside his charging. Lena Zaxel adjusted mid-charge, reaching for her with arms designed to grapple and crush. His hands closed on empty air as Maya dropped low and moved again to the crowd. It looked like she was running away to anyone who understood combat geometry. She was controlling distance and angle with precise footwork. Zaxel spun, surprisingly agile for his size, and came at her again. This time, Maya didn't move as far as she let him get close, let his hands almost reach her, then redirected his momentum with a sharp pull on his extended arm. Basic judo principle. Used the opponent's force against them. Zaxel stumbled, but caught himself. His warrior training preventing a fall. "You're quick," he acknowledged, "but you can't run forever." "Not running," Maya replied. Then she moved in. The first real exchange happened faster than most of the audience could track. Maya closed distance, got inside Zaxel's reach, where his size became a disadvantage. She struck 3 times in rapid succession, a palm strike to a joint in his exoskeleton, an elbow to a nerve cluster she'd identified in her anatomical studies, a knee to the side of his leg where the armor plates met. None of the strikes would have seemed particularly powerful to observers, but Zaxiel's leg buckled slightly, and his breathing rhythm changed. "You know thoracian anatomy," he said, and there was new respect in his voice. "I studied my opponents." Maya replied. She moved again as he swung at her. The blow, powerful enough to crack bone if it landed, didn't land for the next minute. The pattern repeated. Zaxiel would attack with strength and technique. Using his natural advantages, Maya would evade or redirect, landing precise strikes on specific targets. She was teaching him and the audience a lesson. Size and strength matter, but so do speed, precision, and knowledge. Then Zaxiel changed tactics. He stopped trying to grapple and started using his reach advantage. Throwing strikes that forced Maya to cover more ground to avoid them was smart fighting. Using his brain as much as his body, Maya adapted. She started timing his strikes, slipping inside his guard. Working the same targets repeatedly. Combat is about accumulation. Individual strikes might not stop an opponent, but systematic damage adds up. 5 minutes in, Zaxiel's breathing was labored. The strikes to his nerve clusters were affecting his coordination. The attacks on his joints were limiting his mobility. He was still dangerous, still capable of ending the fight with one good hit, but his window of opportunity was closing. Then he landed a strike Maya had committed to an attack on his left side and didn't see the right arm coming until it was too late. Impact caught her across the ribs and face, lifting her off her feet and sending her sliding across the arena floor. The crowd erupted. Blood ran from Maya's nose where the exoskeleton ridge had split the skin. Her ribs screamed pain, signals that she acknowledged, and filed away. She rolled to her feet and touched her face, her fingers coming away red. Several species in the crowd showed signs of distress. For some, the sight of human blood triggered sympathetic responses. Shakessel had frozen, clearly concerned. He'd done serious damage. "Do you yield?" he asked. Maya wiped the blood from her face with the back of her hand. Then she smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Red stained her teeth, and the look in her eyes was something primal, something that made several students in the front rows instinctively lean back. She didn't answer with words. She attacked. What happened next would be studied in combat classes. For years afterward, Maya came at Zaxiel like a wave, flowing around his defenses with combinations drawn from 6 different martial arts traditions. A Muay Thai clinch that controlled his head despite the height difference. A judo throw adapted for his center of gravity that put him on the ground for the first time. Brazilian jiu-jitsu joint manipulation that hyperextended his arm before he could stand. Wrestling control that kept him from using his strength advantage every time he tried to power out of a position. She was already transitioning to the next one every time he thought he knew what she was doing. She shifted to a different system. The blood from her nose continued to flow, but she didn't slow down. 8 minutes had passed. Zaxiel was exhausted in a way he'd never experienced. His joints ached from repeated precise damage. His breathing was ragged. His vision was starting to blur from oxygen debt. Humans, he was learning, had terrifying endurance. Maya had maneuvered him exactly where she wanted him. She had his back, her legs hooked around his midsection, one arm wrapped around his throat in a configuration she'd adapted specifically for. Thoracian physiology was a rear naked choke, modified to account for his different neck structure and the gaps in his exoskeleton. Yield, she said quietly, directly into where his... The medical bay was unusually crowded for a training exercise. Aftermath. Maya sat on one exam table, while Zaxiel occupied another across the room, both surrounded by scanning equipment and concerned medical staff. Dr. Threshik, a Velsharen physician with decades of experience treating multiple species, worked on setting Maya's broken nose with practiced efficiency. The bone will heal cleanly in about 6 days with standard treatment. The doctor said your ribs are bruised but not fractured, which is remarkable given the force of impact. Human bone density is higher than our database suggested. We're denser than we look, Maya replied, her voice slightly nasal from the medical paste covering her nose across the room. Zaxiel was having his hyperextended joints treated with regenerative wraps. Thoraxian had been mostly silent since being helped off the arena floor. Though his eyes tracked Maya with new wariness, Professor Velthar entered the medical bay with a datapad in one hand and an expression that Maya had learned meant complicated news. The fight footage has gone viral on the Academy network, he announced in the last hour. It's been shared 47,000 times. Military analysts from the Kryn Defense Forces, Thoraxian Strategic Command, and at least 6 other species military branches have requested official copies. Great. Maya muttered, I'm going to be a training video. You already are, Velthar said. But his tone wasn't unkind. The Commandant wants to see both of you tomorrow morning. Are we in trouble? Zaxiel asked. It was the first time he'd spoken since yielding no. The professor replied, but there are questions that need answering, and decisions to be made about how the Academy responds to this. After the medical staff cleared them both for release, Maya and Zaxiel found themselves walking the same direction through the Academy. Corridors. Students stopped to stare. Some pointed. Some whispered. Some simply moved out of the way. The reactions varied by species. Some showed newfound respect. Others displayed what might have been fear. I underestimated you, Zaxiel said finally as they walked. I underestimated your entire species. I know, Maya replied. That was the point of the demonstration. You could have killed me, continued. There were at least 3 moments where you had killing positions if you'd chosen to take them. Maya glanced at him. This was a teaching moment, not an execution. Why did you show mercy? The question seemed genuinely curious rather than accusatory, because we're supposed to be learning to fight beside each other, not kill each other, Maya said, and because proving humans can fight isn't the same as proving we want to. They reached a junction where their paths diverged. Zaxiel paused, then performed a Thoraxian gesture of respect that involved crossing his arms over his chest and bowing his head. I would like to train with you, he said, to learn what you know. If you're willing to teach someone who called your species helpless, Maya returned the gesture. With a human nod. Tomorrow after we meet with the Commanda, she said, bring your questions the next morning. Maya and Zaxiel reported to Commandant Varys's office precisely on time. The Commandant was a Grenfolk, ancient even by their long-lived species standards, who had commanded mixed species units during 3 separate conflicts. Her office walls were covered with commendations from a dozen different worlds. Sit, she said without preamble. Both cadets sat. IV watched the fight footage 6 times. Varys continued. I've also reviewed both of your Academy records, your entrance evaluations, and your performance assessments. She fixed Maya with a steady gaze from multiple ice talks. Sergeant Chen, your file indicates extensive martial arts training prior to military service, but the specificity and sophistication you demonstrated was remarkable. Where did you learn to adapt techniques for non-human anatomy? During the contact war, ma'am, Maya replied. I served with the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit. We fought alongside and against multiple species. Field adaptation was necessary. The Commandant's ice talk swiveled in a pattern indicating understanding. And you, Cadet Zaxiel, what did you learn from this experience? Zaxiel straightened in his chair. That biological advantages are only advantages if properly applied. Ma'am, that study and preparation matter as much as natural gifts, and that I have significant gaps in my understanding of human capabilities. Good, Varys said. Both of you learned the right lessons. She tapped her datapad and the office's holodisplay activated, showing a galactic map with numerous military installations marked. The Galactic Defense Initiative has been requesting human combat instructors for the past 2 years, she said. Earth's military has been reluctant to share detailed combat doctrine, claiming it's not appropriate for interspecies training. This footage is going to change that conversation. Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. Ma'am, I didn't intend to create a diplomatic incident. You didn't, the Commandant assured her, but you did demonstrate something the GDI has been trying to prove. Humans bring unique capabilities to mixed species units, capabilities that could benefit everyone if properly understood and integrated. She turned off the display. Starting next week, the Academy is adding a new elective course, Adaptive Close Quarters Combat. Sergeant Chen, you'll be teaching it. Professor Velthar will supervise, ma'am. I'm still a cadet, Maya. Started you're a sergeant with combat experience teaching other cadets. Bareth interrupted. We do it all the time. This is just making it official. Cadet Zaxel. You're assigned as assistant instructor Zaxels. Surprise was visible even through his exoskeleton, ma'am. You now understand what it's like to fight against human techniques. The Commandant said that perspective will be valuable for students learning to fight alongside humans. Dismissed. The hallway outside the Commandant's office was quiet. Maya leaned against the wall, processing what had just happened, teaching an entire course. She said, I wasn't ready for that. Neither was I ready to fight you, Zaxel replied. But we adapt, isn't that the human way? Maya laughed, then winced as the movement pulled her bruised ribs. I guess it is. Word of the new course spread even faster than the fight footage had by midday. Over 60 students from 15 different species had registered for the elective the training. Coordinator had to move it to a larger facility and add a second session to accommodate demand. All reactions were positive in the commissary that evening. Maya overheard a group of cadets from species that valued strength and natural weapons discussing the fight. It's disturbing. One was saying the way she just kept coming despite being injured. Like she didn't feel pain humans feel. Pain, another replied, they just don't let it stop. That's what makes them. Frightening their tool users who made themselves into weapons. What happens when you give weapons to a species that already weaponized their own bodies? Maya didn't join the conversation, but she noted the fear in their voices. This was what Professor Velthair had warned her about proving. Capability was one thing, managing the fear that capability inspired was something else entirely. Kiri found her sitting alone near the observation windows. You're famous, her roommate said, sliding into the seat across from her. Half the academy wants to train with you, the other half wants to avoid you, I noticed. Maya said, how do you feel about it? It was a loaded question from a telepath Kiri could probably sense. Maya's emotional state, regardless of what she said, conflicted. Maya admitted, I wanted to prove humans weren't helpless. I didn't want to make people afraid of us. Fear and respect are sometimes the same thing. Kiri observed, especially in military culture, you showed strength, skill, and control that earns respect, but strength without control would have earned fear. The difference matters. Maya nodded slowly. Zaxel said, I could have killed him, you could have. Kiri agreed multiple times. The fact that you didn't is what separates you from the monsters some species worry humans might be. That evening, Maya's small study group met in their usual training room, but instead of 5 members, 20 cadets showed up where it had spread. Species that had never shown interest in human techniques now wanted to learn. Maya looked at the crowd and made a decision. Okay, she said before we start. Everyone needs to understand something. What I'm going to teach you isn't about making you fight like humans. It's about understanding principles that work regardless of your biology leverage. Timing, position, anatomy, these things are universal. She gestured for volunteers. She nervous Pixith stepped forward. Your species is fast, but not strong. Maya said, so we don't train you to overpower opponents. We train you to use their power against them. She demonstrated a basic redirect technique, showing how the small Pixith could move a much larger opponent with proper positioning. Then she called up a Kryn. For arms, give you options, she explained, but they also give you more joints to protect. We train you to use the extra limbs as advantages while protecting their vulnerabilities for 2 hours. She worked with different species, adapting techniques to their unique anatomy. Shaxel assisted, offering insights from his perspective as someone who had fought against these methods. By the end of the session, everyone was exhausted but energized. 3 months had passed since the fight that changed everything at the Galactic Military Academy. The initial frenzy had settled into something more sustainably. Genuine shift in how different species understood and worked with each other. Maya stood at the front of Training Hall 7, now officially designated as the Adaptive Close Quarters Combat Facility. 40 students from 18 different species filled the space. Organized into practice groups based on similar body configurations, rather than species. Kryn worked with a Meltorian, both having 4 limbs to coordinate 3 picks, if practiced with 2 Velsharans. All focusing on speed-based techniquestial moved between groups. Offering corrections and encouragement in his rumbling voice, the Thoraxian had transformed over. The past months, his initial shame at losing had evolved into genuine curiosity about combat systems beyond his cultural traditions. He had become one of Maya's most dedicated students, and her most effective assistant, remember. Maya called out over the controlled chaos. The principle isn't about strength, it's about creating mechanical disadvantage for your opponent, she demonstrated with a volunteer. A young Grenfolk named Tog, who had been with her study group from the beginning, despite Tog being much larger than Maya. She put him in a joint lock that had him tapping out immediately. I'm not stronger than Tog, she explained, but I don't need to be. His elbow only bends one direction. I just applied pressure perpendicular to that direction. Physics doesn't care. About muscle mass, the class worked through the technique. Maya and Zaxel moved between groups, making adjustments for different anatomies. A Thoraxian's joint required a different angle than a Crinsa. Velshron's flexibility meant the lock had to be deeper, but the principle remained constant after the physical training. Maya gathered everyone. For the theoretical component, this was her favorite part, where combat became philosophy question for the class. She said, "Why do you think humans developed so many different fighting systems?" "We studied this last week," said Rill, one of the Pixis twins, because humans fought each other throughout history. True. Maya acknowledged, but why so many different systems? Why not just one optimal fighting method? The room fell silent as students considered finally. A quiet voice from the back spoke up. It was Xenola, a Valsharan cadet who had been badly injured during the contact. Warren still struggled with physical training because there is no one optimal method. Xenola said every system was developed for specific circumstances, different cultures, different threats, different goals. Maya smiled. Exactly right. Muay Thai developed in Thailand, where fighters needed to use 8 points of contact efficiently. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu evolved from Japanese systems, but was adapted for different body types and real-world self-defense. Krav Maga was created for military personnel who needed to neutralize threats quickly. Each system is optimal for its context. She pulled up a holographic display showing historical footage from Earth Ancient. Wrestlers grappling in dust, monks practicing forms in mountain temples, soldiers training in hand-to-hand combat. But here's what matters for us. Maya continued, every system, regardless of its origin, discovered the same fundamental truths: balance, leverage, timing, position. These aren't human concepts, they're universal. Yeah. And that means you can adapt them to your own biology and circumstances. Zaxel stepped forward to add his perspective. When I fought Sergeant Chen, I believed my natural advantages made me superior, he said. Strength, armor, size. What I learned was that advantages only matter if you can apply them. She controlled position, which negated my size. She controlled timing, which negated my strength. She controlled my balance, which made my armor irrelevant. He gestured to the assembled students. Each of you has natural advantages. The Pixith have speed, the Kryn have multiple limbs. The Thoraxians have armor and mass. This class teaches you how to maximize those advantages, while protecting their corresponding vulnerabilities. The theoretical session continued for another. Our students asked questions, debated applications, shared insights from their own cultural combat traditions. Maya noticed something remarkable happening. Species that had been natural rivals or had fought wars against each other were now collaborating on fighting techniques. Thoraxian and a Kryn, whose species had territorial disputes going back centuries, worked together to develop a grappling system that accommodated both two-limb and four-limb configurations. All right? Maya said as the session wound down. Remember, next week we're covering defensive techniques against multiple opponents. Practice your footwork and positioning. As students filed out, several stayed behind to ask individual questions or request extra practice. Maya made time for each of them. This was as much about building bridges between species as it was about teaching combat. Curry waited until the training hall was empty before approaching. The commandant wants to see you, she said again. Maya groaned. What is it this time? She didn't say, but her emotional signature suggested it was important. Commandant Veritha's office looked the same as it had 3 months ago, but the atmosphere was different. Also present were Professor Velthair and 2 officers. Maya didn't recognize a human admiral and a Kryn General Sergeant Chen. "Reporting as ordered," Maya said, snapping to attention at ease. The Admiral said, "I'm Admiral Kowalski, Earth Defense Forces. This is General Turvax of the Kryn Military Council. We've been watching your program here with great interest." Maya's stomach tightened. This felt significant. The Galactic Defense Initiative has formally requested that Earth share human martial arts doctrine with allied species. Admiral Kowalski continued previously, "We declined due to concerns about militarizing combat systems that were deeply tied to human culture. Your work here has demonstrated that these systems can be taught in ways that promote understanding rather than just lethality." General Turvax spoke next, his mandibles clicking softly. "I fought against humans during the contact war. Said it was terrifying because we didn't understand what we faced. Humans who fought with an intensity and adaptability we'd never encountered after the war. I studied human history and combat doctrine. What I found was sophisticated. Yes, but also philosophical. Your martial arts aren't just about fighting. They're about discipline, respect, and understanding violence well enough to avoid it when possible." Maya wasn't sure where this was going, but she remained silent. "Commandant Vareth took over. The GDI wants to establish an interspecies combat training program. So," she explained, "you would be the primary human instructor, working with specialists from other species to develop integrated combat doctrine for mixed species units. It would be based here at the Academy, with a rotating roster of military personnel from allied worlds." "Ma'am, I'm still a cadet," Maya protested. "I haven't even graduated yet." "You'll graduate early with honors," Admiral Kowalski said, "and be promoted to lieutenant. This program is too important to wait." Maya looked between the assembled officers. "May I ask a question?" "Ma'am, go ahead. What's the real goal here?" Maya asked. "Is this about making better fighters, or is this about something else?" The Admiral smiled. "Smart question. The real goal is integration. The Galactic Defense Initiative is only as strong as the trust between member species right now. Most species fight in homogeneous units because they don't understand each other's capabilities. You're teaching them to understand not just human capabilities, but the capabilities of every species they train with," General Turvax added. "During the contact war, many Kryn died because we made assumptions about human weakness. I want to ensure the next generation doesn't make similar assumptions about any species. The program you've created does exactly that." Maya took a deep breath. "I need to talk to my students first." She said, "Make sure the program continues properly. If I'm reassigned, the program comes with you." Commandant Vareth said, "Your current students will form the initial cohort. Additional students will be added next semester. You'll have full authority to design curriculum and select instructors." It was overwhelming 3 months ago. She had just been trying to prove humans weren't helpless now. She was being asked to revolutionize. "Interspecies military training I accept," Maya said on one condition. Admiral Kowalski raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" "Cadet Zoxel is promoted to co-director of the program." Maya said his perspective as someone who learned these systems from the outside is invaluable in having non-human leadership. Sends a message that this isn't about human superiority. The officers exchanged glances. "Agreed." The Admiral said, "Both of you will be promoted and assigned to the program 2 weeks later." Maya stood in the expanded training facility that now occupied an entire wing of the Academy. The new interspecies combat training program was officially launching with 60 students from 23 different special shaxels stood beside her, both of them wearing their new rank insignia. "Nervous?" he asked quietly, terrified. "Maya admitted you?"